So I've made a lot of videos about things like minimalism, intentionality, saving money, and all those things are great principles that I like to live my life by. But none of those exclude the fact that I am still a normal person, and sometimes I still like to have new, fancy things. I still like nice stuff. I think we all have that in common. While I try very hard to impress the fact that living an intentional life is an important thing to do and that it really can contribute to a better quality of life on the whole, living an intentional life does not mean depriving yourself of things. There are a lot of things that I'm very frugal about, a lot of things that I personally just don't find any value in and therefore don't have any desire to spend my money on or even my time on because they're just not important to me. But something that I think is often overlooked in this conversation is that the entire point of being frugal, the entire point of being intentional and strategic with how you spend your money and your time and all of your other resources is not just for the sake of doing so, but so that you can allocate those resources to things that are actually more important to you. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 questions that I ask myself every time that I go to make a purchase. These are questions that allow me to think critically, take a step back, and decide whether or not this is a good use of my money, whether or not this is something that I want to invest my time in, whether or not it's something I'm actually going to value and get good use of, or if I'm better saving that money. My hope is that these questions allow you to look at things a little bit more logically and objectively, and most importantly, just help you to decide where you assign value and where you don't. So let's jump right into them. The very first question that I have to ask myself anytime I'm about to buy anything at all is, can I afford this? The reason this has to be question number 1 is because if the answer is no, then the rest of the questions are kind of irrelevant. If I can't afford something, I definitely just shouldn't be buying it. When I'm asking myself if I can afford something, what I'm really asking is, do I have the full amount of money, the cash needed to purchase this today outright? That doesn't mean can I finance it, it doesn't mean can I afford the monthly payment on it, it doesn't mean can I put it on my credit card and worry about it later. It means, do I have physically in my possession the money to spend on this thing in its entirety right now? It also means asking myself if this is a reasonable purchase in proportion to my income. For example, when it comes to buying a car, there are a lot of people who will spend 1 or 2 times their annual income on a car. And they probably don't have the cash for it, and they probably can't pay for it outright, but because they can cover the $400 or $500 or $600 a month payment, they think it's affordable. And in my not so humble opinion, spending 2 times your annual income on a vehicle is insane. When asking myself if I can afford something, I'm also asking myself, even if I have the cash in my possession right now, if spending it on this thing is going to sabotage me down the road, if spending my money on this is going to prevent me from spending my money on that later on, if buying this thing is going to make it hard for me to pay my bills this month or next month, or if there's going to be something more important that pops up and then I'm going to be like, damn it, I wish I had that money, but I don't because I spent it on another thing. If that's the case, then I can't afford it. A rule of thumb that I personally like to follow is that when I'm buying something that is a want versus an actual need, is to look at not only if I can afford to buy it in cash today, but if I could afford to buy it twice. Like, could I buy this thing and then take that same amount of money and still comfortably save it or invest it for later? If so, then it's probably a reasonable amount of money for me to be spending. And if not, I really need to reconsider if that's a good use of my funds at this time. If the answer to can I afford it is yes, the second question I like to ask myself is, why do I want this thing? I think that when it comes to various decisions in life, knowing your why is so important because it'll keep you focused and it'll allow you to kind of scrutinize whether or not the decisions you're making are good decisions or bad decisions. So whatever it is you're thinking about buying, why do you want it? Is it going to improve the quality of your life? Is it going to make your life easier? Is it something you're going to get a lot of joy out of? Or is it something you want just because you saw somebody else has it? Or just because it's shiny and it looks impressive? Or just because you're bored and you're looking for something to tinker with? It's so easy to just get caught up in the rush of doing what everyone else is doing just because they're doing it. You might look outside and see your neighbor getting their house landscaped and think, wow, that looks so nice. But until you notice that, you didn't think there was anything wrong with yours. You might look and find that your neighbor has a new car and you might think that by comparison, yours looks like a beater, but you didn't feel that way about it until you looked at theirs. So whatever it is you're about to buy, even if you can comfortably afford it, ask yourself why you want it. Ask yourself if it's actually going to serve you, if you're actually going to find value in it, or if you're just buying it to try to fill some sort of superficial void within you. Another thing to keep in mind is that you should be buying things that serve the person you actually are, not just your fantasy self. For anybody who's never heard of a fantasy self before, your fantasy self is essentially like the optimal version of you in an ideal world. The person that you want to be, the person you want to be seen as, but maybe the person that you aren't actually. Like, your fantasy self might be the kind of person who does yoga and drinks green smoothies and takes cold showers at 5 a.m. every morning, but the actual you may not actually do any of those things, even if you really want to or you want to eventually start doing them. So when you're buying something, ask yourself if you want it for you or if you're trying to appeal to that person that you wish you were, but that you aren't quite there yet. A false first step isn't ever going to help you to get where you want. If you want to be happier, healthier, more active, more responsible, more whatever, you generally don't need a purchase to kickstart that habit. Question number 3 that I like to ask myself before making a purchase is, do I already own something that can serve this purpose? I think that there is an astronomical amount of redundancy in life, and I think that technology is only making that worse. There are so many things that are being marketed to us as the newest, hottest craze, the thing that everybody has to have, and by and large, most of these new products do things that we've already been doing for years without them. I know I've mentioned this before, but I personally don't find any value in a smartwatch, which basically just does everything that your smartphone already does. Similarly, I don't see any value in having a tablet that does everything your phone does except for make calls. And for sure, I'm sure that there's certain people who are going to sound off in the comments and say, well, I have this really particular need and this really particular thing that I do with this item and I need it. And that's fine. If you do find value in it, that's okay. That's the whole point of asking these questions, is to figure out if this is something that actually is important to you and that you actually do have value in. But for a lot of us, the redundancy is kind of overkill. Sometimes I get home late from work and I don't have any food cooked and I'm hungry and I think, you know what, maybe I should get an air fryer. Maybe that would just make my life a little bit easier. I'd be able to cook things a little bit quicker. But then I remember that an air fryer is just a convection oven and my oven has a convection setting, and even if it takes 2 extra minutes to preheat, big whoop, it's fine, and I don't really need to spend money on yet another item. The truth is that the vast majority of us own a lot more things than we realize, and our lives are a lot more comfortable than we like to acknowledge. There are very few things in life that we can't do with the resources we already have. And I do think, unfortunately, technology is kind of hitting a wall at this point where they're recognizing that we've had so much rapid advancement over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And our lives are so cushy and so comfortable now, even for those of us that are not wealthy, that we're kind of at a point where the things that are new and the things that are different are not really that new and not really that different. My robot vacuum is a perfect example. Technically speaking, I already own something that can do this job because I do have a wireless stick vacuum, but by letting the robot take care of the majority of my vacuuming in the house, it really frees up a lot of my time, which I really value. It also allows me to do things like set it remotely while I'm away at work or before I get out of bed in the morning, so I can walk into a clean, freshly vacuumed home, and that makes me feel really good. So to me, this is a worthwhile investment. So let's say you've checked off these first 3 questions now. You're looking at buying something, you know you can afford it, you know you have good reason for wanting it, and there isn't really anything else you own that could serve that purpose. Great. The next question I like to ask myself is, how many times will I use this thing? And more importantly, what is the cost per use going to be? Cost per use is such an important metric in determining the actual value of something. If I was to buy a winter jacket for $500 and only wear it like 5 times, that would cost me $100 every single time that I wore it. Can you imagine like going and putting on your jacket and it costing you $100 every time? That's obscene. That would be a huge waste of money. But if I bought that same jacket for $500 and I wore it year after year after year and I wore it all season long and I got hundreds and hundreds of wears out of it, the cost per use would be significantly lower and it would be an okay value. This concept can apply to pretty much anything from clothing and shoes, to tech gadgets, to furniture, to really almost anything that you're buying. How many times do you reasonably expect to use this thing? And when you divide that by the cost, how much are you actually paying every time you use it? I think exercise equipment is a great example of this because it's something that's generally quite expensive. People invest a hefty amount of money into it. Things like exercise bikes and treadmills and Bowflexes. People still buy Bowflex, that thing that gives you like titty muscles. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. But people buy these machines that are really costly, really big, really bulky, and really they're trying to appeal to that fantasy self. They're trying to appeal to that person that works out every day and that lives a healthy lifestyle, even if that's not actually who they are deep down today. And they spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on these things and they use them a handful of times and then they wind up becoming clothing racks. Now, as important as cost per use is, the truth is that it's not always something you can fully control. Unfortunately, our society is plagued by something called planned obsolescence, which is when companies design products that are intentionally designed to fail or to break after a short period of time. And so the 5th question I like to ask myself is, how long will this last? I think smartphones are a great example. They've become really expensive in the last number of years. It's now not at all unusual to spend $1,000 or $1,500 even on a phone. And you know that the first year you have that phone, it's gonna be great. And by year 2, it's gonna slow down quite a bit. And by year 3, most people are well overdue for wanting to replace their phone. So even if this is an item that you're using every single day and you're getting a lot of value out of, the truth is that if you're spending $1,500 on a phone, which is gonna need to be replaced in 3 years' time, it's costing you $500 per year over and above like your monthly bill. That's just to own the device itself. So asking yourself how long something is gonna last is a really good way to kind of put things into perspective and decide how much value you're actually gonna get from it and how much money it's actually worth spending on it. So when it comes to buying something like a smartphone, I personally refuse to buy the newest model no matter what, because I know that if I buy the brand new one or I buy one that's 3 generations old, Either way, in 3 years' time, I'm gonna need to buy a new one all over again, and there's really no point. I can spend $1,500 today on the iPhone, I don't know what number they're on now, 14, 15, 16, I've lost track. I can spend an obscene amount on that, or I could spend about half, get the iPhone 11 or the iPhone 12, and in 3 years' time, I'm still gonna need to replace it. So it's actually costing me significantly less, and I'm gonna wind up in the same place as everybody else anyways. I'm a big proponent of taking care of your stuff, treating it with respect, being careful with it, and trying to squeeze every last drop of value out of it. But unfortunately, you can't polish a turd, right? And the sixth and final question I like to ask myself when I'm about to make a purchase, assuming that everything else is checked off, is where am I gonna put this thing? And this is kind of more on the minimalism side than it is the money saving side, though there's definitely a big crossover between those two topics. But I'm somebody who really dislikes clutter. You can see I try to keep my house pretty clear and minimal. And if I'm gonna buy something, I wanna make sure that I have a space for it, somewhere where it's gonna belong, it's not gonna stand out like a sore thumb, it's gonna fit in nicely into my home, and it's not gonna bother me as just another piece of clutter or another piece of crap lying around. If you're looking at buying yourself a new piece of clothing, the answer might be pretty obvious. It might go in your closet, but if your closet is already so full and bursting with so much clothing in it that you don't have room for another piece, you maybe don't need to be buying that new thing. For items that are larger or just more niche, really figuring out where in your home this is gonna go will help you to determine not only how to keep your home clutter-free, but if it's something you actually need. If you can't think of a single place in your home to store this item where it's gonna be out of sight, out of mind, and it's not gonna bother you, and it's still gonna be accessible and easy to use, it might be a good sign that it's not something you truly need. Making purchases, spending money is such an emotional decision for so many of us because we see things and we're not really any more sophisticated than crows collecting tinfoil. Like we see shiny things and we want them and it's in our nature, and marketers spend billions and billions of dollars every year to try to make us feel insufficient with our lives and try to sell us the solution, to sell us the product or sell us the service that's gonna make our lives complete and make us be the person we wanna be and make everybody see us how we wanna be seen. And the truth is that 99.9% of the time, it is a pile of steamy horse shit. But if we have the ability to take a step back, even just take a breather for a second, look at things a little bit less emotionally, a little bit more logically, and ask ourselves if the decisions we're making are really in line with who we want to be and what we want from our lives and what we want to accomplish, it'll allow us to make decisions with such a more clear head and make better decisions on the whole.
Yes, Frau, on the whole, I think Preparation H feels good.
I believe that this thought process is the complete antithesis to Amazon Prime. It's the complete opposite mindset from just hitting the buy it now button and waiting for something to show up on your doorstep tomorrow morning. And in a world where everybody wants more and they want it faster and they want it better and they want it right now, and everybody's so impatient, everybody's so demanding, I think giving yourself a little bit of breathing room can only be a good thing. I'm really curious to know what kind of spender you consider yourself to be. Are you somebody who is more intentional and more analytical, or are you somebody who's more spontaneous and really enjoys the instant gratification of the Amazon Prime effect? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video at all, if you found any value in it, please go ahead and hit that like button. I really appreciate you guys watching, and believe it or not, hitting that like button really actually does help out the channel. Feel free to subscribe as well. If you haven't done so yet, hit the little notification bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. If you're interested in supporting this channel and the work that I do here, I've recently opened up channel memberships. So you can join Levi's fan club by hitting the button down below that says join. You'll get a little custom Levi emoji and you get priority replies to any comments you leave on the videos as well. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. I'm trying very hard to be more active on there. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.